everyone. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, teacher. Now go there. If we could just turn off our cell phones this morning, that'd be great. And this is a homeowners only meeting. Not to be rude, but if you're not a homeowner, please leave. There are some issues in here that are for owners' information only. And we've got a lot to talk about this morning. One of the things we're going to do is at the end we'll have people with roving mics. Please, whatever you do, wait till the microphone shows up. We've got a lot of really positive comments about the fact that we're putting this on the internet. You can look at it afterwards. And we'd like to continue the practice because we have a lot of people that just can't make the meeting, and it's important that we give them the opportunity to hear what these gentlemen have to say. A couple of things to announce this morning. The Super Bowl party. You will have to, it's BYOB only. We have a little issue with not having a liquor license, and I don't even want to go into the details, but you're more than welcome to bring your own. We'll have the mix and everything here, so we'll have to do that until the foreseeable future, until we can get this license thing straightened out. Because I like all of you, but I don't want to see whoever is pouring going to jail if we have a kind of an ugly ABC person show up, and that could happen. And second, the homeowners dinner is coming up, as you all know. We had an issue with attendance last year, not with how many people showed up, but how many people we could actually have in the building. So please, when you get the announcement that sales are open for those tickets, please make reservations, because we're not going to be able to have anybody enter without, they are now? Okay, without a ticket, it's, no ticky, no eaty. And that's unfortunate, but we can only seat 246, 250 people in here for dinner and remain within the fire codes, okay? Today promises to be a very informative meeting. We thought it was due because a lot of things have taken place with the bankruptcy and a lot of important things, and somewhat of a history lesson on where we got and how we arrived where we're at right now. I'm sure some of you don't know these two gentlemen, but they're the two attorneys that got us through the construction defect lawsuit. Will Lemkel, who is always on the phone, and Mark, who does all the real work and just hands it to Will, who takes credit. So, listen, I have to tell you, we really deserve, these two guys deserve a round of applause simply because they've gotten us to the point that we are. A comment was made to me a while ago that all this is just ridiculous. You could have hired a good real estate agent, could have solved the whole problem. And I can tell you we would have had a nice strip of concrete in the desert if that's what took place, because you have to understand trustees, they are not our friends, and these two guys are a bit at the forefront of dealing with them. They have some interesting stories to tell on some of the developments and how we got here. And with that, I will turn the meeting over to these two gentlemen. And again, hold your questions to the end, and we'll run around with the microphone so that those questions can be heard by those who are not in attendance. Okay? Welcome.
Thank you. First of all, good morning, everyone, and thank you again for spending time on your weekend to come to the meeting today. Obviously, it's something that we enjoy doing in terms of sharing the information that we have with everyone, and also believe it makes everything move a lot smoother when you all as a group, as an HOA, do two things. One, participate, but also continue to keep yourself informed about where we are in the process. I know from dealing with the board through the whole process and with the trustee and their round of individuals that this process seems to have no end, and that's one of the things we'll try to demonstrate today when we go through the PowerPoint that we've prepared, which will be, as I've done in the past, in some instances, be a little bit of a review of how, where we've been, so we know where we're going, and then it'll take us right up to where we are today, and then ultimately where we think we're going to be in the next 30 to 60 days. As John mentioned, Mark is the person that I work with and has been working on matters for the Rancho Resort from day one. I started working, as you all know, for I think two boards ago with the board here in 2005. So I've almost been working with the resort now for 10 years on various issues from time to time. So I know a lot about it, all the way back from its original inception to Thousand Trails, and one of the reasons why we've got to the point that we've gotten is that the documents were set up in such a way that forced us to deal with certain issues later that we should never have had to deal with. So I'll be available at the end to answer questions. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Yremovich, Mark, who's sitting to my left. A lot of you who were involved with the trial know Mark and met with him, dealt a lot with him on it. I know Joe Crispino is here, did with us, and some others. I don't know if John Schacht is here or not, but in any event, Mark is going to run through the PowerPoint presentation and let you guys know where we are. The good news with the whole thing, and I'll steal Mark's apple cart away from him, is that we do have documents now which we have given to the trustee that we have represented him. We would sign and enter into the agreement. So that is a huge, huge development that was difficult for us to get to for reasons that Mark will enumerate. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark and let him run through the PowerPoint presentation with everyone. Again, like I said, I'll be available at the end with Mark to answer questions, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark at this time, who, as John rightly said, does do the work.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Mark Yremovich. Although I do a lot of the work, I will not be able to do that.
I didn't say anything about microphones.
I would not be able to do that without learning everything from Will. So, do we need a? Oh, okay, great. Would not be able to do that without the help of Will and the board members present and past. So with that, I'd like to begin our PowerPoint presentation and bring everybody up to speed with a term you're going to hear a lot, which is the process of the bankruptcy and the purchase of the properties out of bankruptcy. Now, everyone's probably really sick of hearing the word process and not really understanding what that means. So before I even get into the PowerPoint, I'd like to kind of give you the lay of the land of how the whole process works. You have, on the one hand, a bankrupt entity, Outdoor Resorts Rancho California, which is a subsidiary company of Outdoor Resorts of America. And what they did was develop a resort in, and many of you that were here during the construction defect lawsuit would already know this, but they developed a resort using smoke and mirrors, hiding the ball, backroom deals with the county, people that aren't even at the county anymore. So step one of this entire process was to figure out, what do we actually own as a resort? Where are the title documents? Where are the grant deeds? Where is everything evidencing exactly what the resort owns? There was a point in time where I don't even think Outdoor Resorts Rancho California, the entity, the developer, even knew what portions of property it owned versus the association. And then on top of that, you've got our office having to go and dig through all the documents and piece it together like a puzzle. I mean, imagine my desk with all sorts of county recording documents, conditional use permits, public reports, grant deeds, condo plan maps, and all of them saying something different. I had to, and Will and I had to sit through and piece it all together and figure out exactly what Rancho's rights as owners are, what properties they own, and what properties we need to receive out of bankruptcy. Now you put a trustee on top of it, and the trustee doesn't really know either. So we're all, in effect, educating each other, sometimes adversarially, sometimes with cooperation, as to what exactly are Rancho's property rights and what properties are owned by all of you. Now, the competing interest is, our job is to make sure that if Rancho does not get all of the property that's in bankruptcy, that we absolutely 100% protect the rights, basic rights that you have. For example, usage of water out of the water tank. I mean, we're out here all the way in the desert. That water is the most important thing out here. If you guys don't have water, or someone comes in and drains your water because of some right they believe they have as purchaser of some properties outside of the resort boundaries, then we have nothing. So we have the competing interests of the resort wanting to protect all its right, entry, access, usage of the roads, water rights, And then on the other side, you have a trustee whose job is to sell the assets of the former Outdoor Resorts Rancho California for the highest possible price. And that's not a knock at the trustee. That is the trustee's, that's the bankruptcy law's edict to the trustee. You have to liquidate these assets and get the most money to pay back the creditors of the bankrupt estate as you possibly can. So we have two competing interests. We have, on the one hand, Will and my efforts to protect the resort, and on the other, the trustee trying to keep the property as marketable as possible. And how do you keep this property marketable? Well, you tell, or you try to reduce our rights. And, well, if you buy this property, you get to use the water tank. If you buy this property, you get to use the water wells. If you buy this property, you get a restaurant and a store and a small office and a small clubhouse. And you can do whatever you want with it. Our job is to say, no, you can't do whatever you want with it. And that is the process right there. Us saying, no, we're putting our foot down. You cannot do this, this, and this, and this with the property. The trustees saying, well, that's not exactly right. We believe we can sell this land and they can use it for whatever they want. So the majority of this process has been in that gridlock. And I can tell you that we absolutely cannot give up basic rights that we have developed either by grant deed or by operation of law. When I say operation of law, when you've been using water for 15 years, you build up under California law rights that just by using it, rights that you don't even need a lawyer to figure out for you, they're just by operation of law. You have the rights to certain amounts of water and usage of water. We need to protect all of that through this deal. So it's been a process, a back and forth process that takes a lot of time and effort and thick skin. And I know that you guys are supportive, but at the same time frustrated. And I can tell you that we are equally as frustrated because we want to get you guys exactly what you paid for the day you bought one of your RV units. And our goal is to make sure that you have all the rights that you thought you were purchasing and that you will continue to have those rights for as long as you are here at the resort. So with that background, I'd like to move forward with the PowerPoint presentation and start with a little history. I recognize many of you, but I see a lot of new faces, so it's always nice to kind of set the table and explain to everybody how this all got started, because when you can understand the inception of the bankruptcy, it's easier to understand where we are today and where we'd like to be tomorrow, and hopefully at the end of this whole process. Now, what I have up here on this first page is, and I know it's hard to see, I didn't know you guys got so technologically advanced since the last time I was here. I had to have this microphone put on me. I thought I'd have a nice big projection screen, but we see we've gone HD, so what we have here is the initial filing. This was a great day in Will and my representation of you when I saw this come across my desk on October 8th, 2012, in the middle of a construction defect lawsuit where this is before we even knew anything about who owned what and that there would be a trustee or anything. We're in the middle of trying to get you guys compensated for the defects that Outdoor Resorts left you. And I get this notice from the United States Bankruptcy Court, Central District of California, that Outdoor Resorts Rancho California has filed voluntarily, they filed for bankruptcy. So that immediately threw a wrench in the entire process and opened up a new, I guess, a whole new door and new avenue for us to have to walk down. And they filed bankruptcy. So what happens at that very moment, the Federal Bankruptcy Court in Riverside, the Central District, appointed a trustee to govern this entire Outdoor Resorts Rancho California's entire property ownership. So we're talking about this large clubhouse, land outside the resort, the entryway, restaurant. At that moment, the trustee now runs all of that land. And that was a problem for us because if, next slide please. One more. And again. The very first thing the trustee does while we're in the midst of a construction defect lawsuit is this pleading here. This is the second worst day of our representation. In the middle, we're about to head into trial and get you guys the funds that you were entitled to from the beginning to fix this place. And they file a notice to federal court for removal of the civil action from state court to the federal court. So what that meant was the trustee said, under my bankruptcy powers, I'm going to take this case, which you all have worked on for the last 4 years in state court, and I'm moving it to federal court. And that's it.
Which would start the whole thing all over again.
All over again. So what Will and I did was we brushed up on bankruptcy law. We hired someone that has been instrumental in our understanding of bankruptcy and in protecting your guys' rights, Marty Eliopoulos of Higgs, Fletcher, and Mack. And the three of us together trudged forward. Both Will and I became licensed to practice in the federal bankruptcy courts in the Central District of California. And let me tell you, it was really exciting. I never thought I'd be able to tell anybody that I would learn anything about bankruptcy. That's one of those things when you're in law school that sounds terrifying. And believe me, it is. Now, the minute they removed it, it is an automatic motion. The trustee is an officer of the federal court. And if he says remove it, the court immediately says, then if you say remove it, then we believe you, because he is a federal officer. So once they remove it, we have to file the notice right here. The notice regarding, it was our motion to bring the case back to state court and to get relief from the bankruptcy stay to pursue the bankrupt entity's insurance. And if you all know now, when we settled the construction defect case after the 5 weeks of trial, the proceeds of the settlement were paid by insurance. So the second the trustee came forward and took over the properties, it froze all of the assets of Outdoor Resorts, including the rights to their insurance. So we had to file motions to not only get to the insurance money, but to get the case just even brought back to state court, which we were able to do. Next slide, please.
So long and short of it is we won.
Yeah. So...
charge him out by word.
So you fast forward to what we call the process. The settlement is done, the monies are in, the resort is being repaired, it looks beautiful. Now the idea is, well, now the trustee owns these properties, the future sites of phases 6 and 7, the restaurant, the office and the small clubhouse. Now we have to figure out how to wrestle that away from the trustee. Some of the properties we believe we already own or should own through agreements with the developer. Other properties we thought would be built out and become part of Rancho. And then a third set of the properties we didn't even know existed. We didn't even know that anybody owned them. We're talking about acres of land out in San Diego County. So the trustee's job is to start selling off the assets, and then that's exactly what he did. If you'll hit one more time. The first thing the trustee did that required a lot of work from us and Marty Eliopoulos is that he sold, I don't know if many of you know this, but the developer originally, the developer and now the trustee owns the hill site where the water tank is, and there's a cell tower in an area up there that that Outdoor Resorts entered into a lease agreement with a cell tower operator to operate his cell tower up there. Well, that immediately became the trustee's asset. So the trustee, in attempting to expand the estate and bring as much money in to the estate, decided he'll sell the land. Well, the motion to sell that land came, a portion of the hill came to us, and in looking through it, I'm looking through this with the bankruptcy attorney, and we realize none of the land is defined. It's just like a sale of land, but it doesn't tell you what portion. And we're thinking, oh my God, there are water towers up there. You know, where is this easement? Where is this license right that you're selling? So we opposed the sale in federal bankruptcy court. And rather than fight us over the sale, the trustee came to us and was forced to essentially define these terms. In other words, we were protecting Rancho's right so that there was a defined area that was being sold and that we knew that area wasn't interfering with the water well up there or the water tank. So step one, and this was in it of itself, and this wasn't even land we were buying, this was a 3 to 4 month process of negotiations, motions, and arguing, and making sure that your water tank isn't affected by this agreement. Ultimately, we reached a deal with the trustee, and the trustee was required to add terms to his agreement with the entity he sold the cell tower to, and it protected Rancho's rights in that we now know where the lease area is, and it's defined, and it can't expand, and it does not affect your water tank, it does not affect your water rights, and you guys are set up into the future with that. Next.
Again, we won.
Make that developer, that cell tower person, if they do damage, we now have a way to go after them, where before, we didn't have that.
Right. It actually expanded your rights. They can't mess with your roads. They can't bring so many trucks through here and tear up the roads and force you guys to pay for it. It was a deal very favorable to the resort. Now the next step is in purchasing property is not just it's not just getting the land, but knowing what exactly you're purchasing. And the board did tons of due diligence. For every minute or hour I spent on this file, which I know you guys think is already too much, the board has spent 5. And the board has done their due diligence to make sure that what they're purchasing is in fact what they're purchasing and is not riddled with liens, taxes, all sorts of things that, let's say if you just ran into a purchase agreement with the trustee, all of a sudden you wake up and there's the IRS is on your door, or the Riverside County is at your door saying, hey, you owe us X amount of money, or some neighbor's knocking on your door and saying, why are you on my land when you think you've bought it? So the first thing the board did is get the entire estate of the bankruptcy estate appraised so that they would understand every single thing they needed to know about this land. And that was a long process. Imagine an appraiser coming in to this property and having to figure out who owns it, what were the intentions of its development, what are the water rights, are there any liens, is there water underground, is there water flowing over the top, are there tax liens, are there property liens, who owns this land, are there easements of the land? I mean, weeks and weeks and weeks of research in county records. We sent them everything we had in the development terms. And the board got an appraisal completed for this property so that they could be educated about what exactly they were purchasing so they didn't walk all of you into a mess and have you purchase a bunch of land that's going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars to either get back rid of or pay to keep. Next slide, please. One more.
Just real quick, I just jumped in on that appraisal report. I know that I've talked to you all who have been at the prior meetings about that, and that's something that's within the board's possession in terms of the totals. I know that's something that's been a big point of interest for, obviously, the members. The big thing there, I just wanted to add, sorry to interrupt you, Mark, is that we wanted to ensure that we knew what the outside value of the property was vis-a-vis what we were negotiating in terms of what we would pay. And ultimately, the board wanted to ensure that when all of that information is turned over, that you see, a number here for an appraisal and a number here for a purchase, as opposed to obviously it looking like that. Because if you paid $2 million for a property that an appraisers come back and said it's worth $500,000, that's a big problem. One of the reasons why the board has, and we've kept an attorney-client privileged communication with respect to the appraisal, is we don't want the appraisal report to fall into the hands of individual developers who may take advantage of that information and then stick their nose into a transaction we're trying to complete. Obviously, they have a right, they can go get their own appraisal if that's what they want to do. But I don't want, we as a unit here, the board and then our office has made a conscious decision that we don't want to be educating people to make steps against us while we're trying to close this deal. So I know that I wanted to jump in because I thought at the end there might be questions. Well, how much is the property worth? When can we get the appraisal? I know that John and Jerry and the rest of the board have had a great desire to turn that appraisal report over to everyone so you can see it. I think when we ultimately get it, you'll be very happy, but I just wanted to give that just 2 seconds information given my prior presentation. So sorry, Mark, go ahead.
Thanks, Will. So moving forward, the next step that the board had to get involved in is inspecting and having the land properly inspected. We're talking about acres of land out in San Diego County, out around the resort that we don't know anything about. And in the board's due diligence, they employed a geotechnical expert and an environmental inspector. So what they ended up doing is they needed to figure out what the geological issues were, if any, which we found out there weren't. And they needed to know that there wasn't any environmental issues out there. Because the last thing in the world you want to do is inherit some sort of plutonium spill out in the middle of the desert. Because as a trustee, they sell the property as is, where is, with all faults. Take it or leave it. You guys want the property, you can have it. It's just you can't come back to us and say, hey, you didn't tell us there was a buried power plant underneath 20 acres of the land. Because that is very, very, very expensive. You do not want the EPA knocking on your door with all the other people that could be knocking on your door and telling you, hey, you got to clean this mess up out there in the middle of nowhere. So the board went forward and had environmental and geological reports completed, and that, again, took, I don't know, John, would you say about 2 months for the environmental? I mean, they covered every square inch of the property out there.
I had the pleasure of going for a ride with the guy up into the territory of the property we're looking at acquiring. He had never driven a four-wheel drive before, and for those of you that have gone up that road, we hit the top of the road at about 30, and I said, if this narrows down, it gets ugly quick. I didn't know you could stop that fast on dirt. It was an interesting event. We did manage to figure out where all the property was, and he did a good job. This report is I don't know, a couple hundred pages long, and it talks about all kinds of issues. And we came back with a clear report. So that was the important part.
And then, as a further part of the board's due diligence, and I apologize for not having a slide for it, but the board had a title company come in and do a preliminary title report in search of all the properties as well, just to double check to make sure that everything matched up with what the appraiser said. So we also have a preliminary title report explaining to us each and every easement or encumbrance on any of the properties that we potentially would purchase. So now that you've got 2 inspection reports, an appraisal, and a preliminary title report, and to be perfectly honest with you, that is all them. They put all their time and effort into getting all of those completed, following up, making sure that they were available for each one of these individuals to ask questions, to answer questions, to provide documents, and John and some of the board members literally rode around with these guys. So how about a round of applause for your board of directors for putting literally 6 months of their time just making sure what Rancho may purchase is actually what they're going to purchase. Let's move forward, please. Okay, so the first thing, one more, is the purchase agreement. Now, how this deal will be structured is as follows. You have a purchase agreement, which is right here. Well, just to show you the amount of paperwork that is involved in this is the purchase agreement. So I guess the easiest way to just show you what we've been doing this whole time is negotiating each and every sentence in all of this. And what we're going to do, as Will said earlier, is we're going to leave this here for you guys to thumb through. But and if you have any questions about the terms, I'll give you the wrong number so you don't get a hold of me. But what you have here is a purchase agreement. And to give you a framework of the potential deal that we would enter into with the trustee is, A lot of you are probably wondering this very basic question. Why can't we just purchase the properties that we want? Why can't we just get the large clubhouse? Why can't we get the Phase 6 and 7 site and nothing else? Well, the problem with that is not up to us. It's what the trustee will sell us. So what the trustee has said and maintained, and it's understandable from his perspective, is I'm not going to piecemeal sell these properties. I'm selling everything to one person. Because what would happen for the trustee is he wouldn't be able to maximize his estate if he sells the future sites of 6 and 7, which is probably the most valued portion of his estate, but then be stuck with desert land out in San Diego County that no one will ever buy. And his job is to dispose of all the assets. So with the trustee, aside of certain properties, which I'll get to, in his mind, he says, I want to sell it all. I'm not going to break out pieces. And there's nothing we can do about that. That's his position, and he's an officer of the court, and he can decide how he wants to sell his estate, however, in whatever manner he wants. So we can't just pluck off the properties that we want. We have to work within his deal framework. So what we have here is a purchase agreement, and this is what will happen if Rancho purchases the entire property. That's the entire bankrupt estate. And I will get into showing you exactly what that means. But in here is an exhibit called Exhibit A. And Exhibit A is a conveyance agreement. Now how that works is the bankruptcy court requires the trustee to sell his estate at the highest value. And how do they determine the highest value? Well, when you enter into an agreement with the trustee to purchase this property, he then, through the bankruptcy court and in the bankruptcy court, has to put the land up for auction. And the reason that is because the bankruptcy court wants evidence in front of them that there's no one there willing to pay more, because the bankruptcy court, the bankruptcy court's duty is to protect the creditors. So they need to know that the property is sold at its maximum value.
Just to jump in here, the reason that exists that way is because in years and years and years past, what you would see is there's a great potential there, right? If I'm a bankruptcy trustee and, Don, I know, has got a few dollars, and him and I sort of have a little backroom deal, what I do is I just go tell him about the property. I, as the trustee, agree to he buys the property for pennies on the dollar. We go before the judge. She has so many transactions. She looks at it. I'm the trustee as an officer of the court. I say, it's the best deal out there. They stamp it. Don runs off with the property that's worth $20 million for $200,000. He sells it. We wait a couple of months. Then I get paid, that way. To eliminate that sort of thing from occurring, this procedure is a mandate by the U.S. federal government to close the transaction. So we have no way of, and I kind of went over that in the last couple of meetings, but anyway, that's the process. Sorry, Don.
So the process is subject to an auction. Now, if the auction occurs and nobody steps forward, then whatever purchase price that Rancho agreed to will be the final deal. Stamped, done, bankruptcy court approves the deal, and it's done. We get everything. Now, if the situation arose where Rancho was outbid by somebody bidding on the property and lost that bidding process, then the conveyance agreement is triggered, which is another whole agreement for property. And I'll get into the details of the conveyance agreement, but the conveyance agreement will give us some properties that we've been entitled to through agreements with the original developer, and some rights to certain portions of the property that'll be easier to explain when I get to those slides. But that is how your purchase agreement functions, and that's why it's literally one agreement with another agreement in it, and within that agreement, there's all these agreements. So keeping track of that is probably one of the most interesting things I've had to do over the last year and a half, but I assure you that I'm on top of it. You can ask Jerry.
Yes.
I think she might know more than me now. I should be paying her. Let's move forward.
So the interesting thing is, this is version what?
Oh,
God. Probably version 10.
Yeah, and each time a new version comes out, we had the privilege of reading all this and making comments and sending it back to them. So if we're all looking a little bleary-eyed, it's because we can't see the small print very well anymore. We're all using magnifying glasses, and I don't know how he's kept up with it. But the problem is, and I'm sure Mark will talk about it, when the trustee would make changes, they wouldn't tell anybody. And they sent us back and said, here you go, sign this. And we got to read it all again, and we hear from Mark and Will, and we'd laugh a little bit, but...
One poorly or purposely placed word or comma in this thing, or any of these, can completely alter Rancho's rights. So it's imperative that we have multiple eyes on these agreements and that we review them each time they're revised. So probably the question everyone wants to know is, well, what the heck are we buying? So what I have here is out of the title report, and I wish we had a bigger screen, but we are purchasing parcels A through P. Now, I have a colored version with like an aerial of this land, but this is the San Diego property out here, and you've got the entrance of the resort right through there. And we've got, these are the future sites of phases 6 and 7. This is your wash area.
Parcel C is 6 and 7.
This is where we're sitting today, right here, in that little square that's this clubhouse parcel.
D2.
This is an access way for what was supposed to be a secondary access road that we've told you guys about in the past. I don't want to get into that conversation and make everyone's blood boil, but it's an ORA thing. And then you've got the like dog park areas and all these parcels out here that are all part of the bankrupt estate. This is what when Robert Shellhorn and Randall Henderson, the original owners of Outdoor Resorts of America, came here. They saw all this land and they bought it from an individual named Riley Lively. And that's all the land they purchased right there. Although they were just going to build the resort here, they bought all of this. Next slide, please. One more. Now this will make a little more sense to you if you could see it, and I apologize again for it not being any larger, but this is the same map overlaid on top of a aerial map of the resort, so you can actually see what those properties would, where they are in relationship to your resort. So again, you see phases, future sites of 6 and 7 are there. You've got the water tank area here. You've got the wash, large clubhouse, your resort. And then what the trustee owns here is well, this is interesting. And this is almost impossible to understand how this was done, but we had to just get past that fact. But the trustee and formerly ORA while you guys own the small clubhouse, the roof, the offices to an extent, and where your little library is, they own the walls of that small office where they used to operate out of.
The interior space.
The interior space, the airspace.
But you own everything else, the roof, the outside.
The doors.
The doors, so you have to maintain that. And then you have to pay for the property taxes. But the inside...
They own that little strip.
Trick.
They own the little strip of sidewalk in front of their office. And once you get in front of the doorway of the small clubhouse, you own that part of the sidewalk. And you own the parking lot in front of the small clubhouse, but they own the parking lot that you pull into where we pulled in this morning. And then they also own a strip of tile from that office to your copy room. When you're walking into the small clubhouse, that screen door, they own that tile across. And they own the copy room, but nothing else. So once you take a left to go see the front desk people, now you're on Rancho's property. Step back, you're on their property. Step forward, you're on your property. You could even stand on both of the properties at the same time. So, on top of that, the trustee owns the restaurant, the store, and the lake by the restaurant. Now, to give you guys a background of why that is, because I know that's such an integral part of the resort. Everybody enjoys having a restaurant and the store and that lake at the property, but the business model of the developer from the beginning was at all these RV resorts that the ORA developed, they wanted to keep something on the property that would constantly generate income. So they thought up, well, why don't we build a store and a restaurant? And we will own it, and we will operate it, and someone will pay us rent, and we'll just have constant cash coming in off of that. We won't even have to do a thing. They had never had the intention of giving that property to the resort. That would always be something under their business plan, assuming that the business would continue to operate, which it's obviously not anymore, to obtain a nice little rent check every month. So that is in the trustee's hands. And then in the trustee's mind, it's more of a hassle for him to operate that because he has to look over it and incur potential liability as a trustee. So he just shut it all down. And we do not own that. The trustee owns that. Now, the trustee also knows that the resort enjoys that restaurant and it's something that's important to the owner. So what is that? That turns on the light bulb for the trustee. Oh, this land's important to them. So you see, it is a leverage point for the trustee. You don't want to pay me what I want, I won't open the restaurant. Simple. So while the board has worked diligently to try to get the restaurant open or try to get it into our hands, it's just not that easy. It's not simple. The trustee knows it's important to the resort, so he uses it as leverage. Do what I want and you'll get the restaurant. Pay what I want and you'll get the restaurant. So that is the only reason your restaurant is not open, because the trustee owns it. It's not in his best interest to lease it out for someone to run, and he knows it's a pressure point for all of you. So in the purchase agreement, if we were to be the successful bidder, we will outright own the restaurant and the store and all of these properties. But just to give you guys an understanding of the efforts the board has made, the board has, through our office, on many occasions, just literally begged the trustee to let us operate the restaurant, let us clean it up. It's such an important part of the resort. And the trustee just says, no, buy it from me. So that's where we are on that. And the small clubhouse office, which is how that small clubhouse office got to how it is today. It's unbelievable how they just reserve the airspace. They reserve the air. Okay, next slide, please.
We can email you guys that map that he showed originally. That's a lot better layout. You can see what it looks like. And we'll try and put one up in the office, too.
Yeah, you can put one on the bulletin board.
Yeah.
Okay, so the good faith bidding procedure. Just one more. So in that agreement, in the purchase agreement, are the defined rules for the bidding procedures and how that all works. I touched on that to the extent that I can, to the extent that you all want to hear about it. It's just a bankruptcy procedure required by federal law to make sure that the person that purchases the land is doing it in good faith, as we'll explain, and for the highest possible price. So let's move on to the next section. Okay, so this is your conveyance agreement. This is the second agreement. This is triggered if the resort is not the successful purchaser of the property. Now, what we slowly realized as we dug through all the documents is that, wow, the devil is in the details. The purchase agreement's terms aren't nearly as important as the conveyance agreement and the agreements that are in the conveyance agreement. Because what will happen is if Rancho is outbid, then what? Well, we need to make sure that all of your rights are protected and that you have the same rights that you thought you were having when you purchased here, and you don't run out of simple things, like most basic resources like water. So if you click it again. The conveyance agreement itself is just filled with more legalese, more terms, more commas, more strategically placed words and things of that nature. But the key to the conveyance agreement is the agreements within that. If you'll hit it again. So what the conveyance agreement, one more time. What the conveyance agreement will give you outright title to is this clubhouse. It'll give you title to the entire parcel around this clubhouse, which was something that the developer, Outdoor Resorts, is required to give you. It'll give you ownership to the lake outside of the restaurant and the store. And it'll also give you ownership of the maintenance yard. which is out, I think everybody knows where the maintenance yard is by now. It'll give you outright title. You will own that property should you not be the successful bidder. So that's important because your maintenance yard you'll own, and you'll be able to build a structure to protect all your equipment and save money for your tractors and all your maintenance equipment from deteriorating in the hot sun and then again in the winter. It'll give you this clubhouse and the tennis courts and the area surrounding it, the pool, and so that you guys outright own that. And it'll give you the lake, which is important because that's something the trustee wants to get rid of because it's more of a hassle for him than it is an asset, because he doesn't want to pay to keep it clean and to get all the sludge out and make sure that it looks nice. So when it's in the resort's control, they can maintain it and keep the property looking nice. So those 3 properties you would own under the conveyance agreement. Now, what's even more important is the rights that you would need to retain if we fall into the conveyance agreement. So what I did was draft these easement agreements and licenses in a way that all of Rancho's rights are protected. And this is where your fight is. This is where the negotiations continually come to a grinding halt. Because every term in these agreements that is favorable to Rancho is one more term that will make it harder for the trustee to sell the property to somebody for more money. So the fight is over these agreements, and looking at this, you're like, seriously, we're fighting over a sliver of grass out here? Well, yeah, we are, because it's important that we have the right to keep it and maintain it, because a sliver of grass left to grow with weeds and everything makes the property look dilapidated. It decreases your guys' values, and it causes all sorts of problems. So what we have here in the conveyance agreement, the first 2 agreements are very important. This is the easement agreement regarding the entry road and the agreement to grant non-exclusive roadway license. Okay, so the entryway is owned by the trustee, not by the resort. The developer retained the rights to own the entryway. Now, they could never block you guys from entering, but they can draft an easement that severely limits your rights in the way you use the entryway road and increases your obligations to maintain it. So we have been arguing with them for months on just giving us the entry road, which they refused to do, and then arguing over the terms of the entry road license, or I'm sorry, the easement agreement.
So let me stop you there. Why would the trustee refuse to give the entry road to the people who own the property that it services? Because he has the ability, if someone else were to buy it, to tell that person that's interested, I can get you access to any other portion of the outlying areas of the resort by giving you the right to go right over the top of the property that you all own. And if it's torn up with big trucks, guess who pays for that? So what Mark has done, and I'm probably stealing one of his big lines and jumping in, is that we have these rights now. So we're not going to allow someone to come in here and take them away from us. It's just not happening on any component of this. So anyway.
Yeah, that's the interesting part, is the agreements they originally wanted you all to enter into give you less rights than you already have today. So that's where the fight is. So now you have we have an agreement that's fair to both parties, and it's our rights in terms of the entry road and maintenance and requirements of that nature. And now the agreements aren't so one-sided as they previously were. What this is they want, and they as the trustee, the agreement to grant a non-exclusive roadway license. The trustee's best interest is to allow any successful bidder, who will undoubtedly be some sort of developer, to have all access and all access pass over your roads to get to wherever he wants to, when he wants to. That, for him, for the trustee, is the easiest way to market it. If you're a potential developer, would you rather hear that, no, you're limited to using one road for a certain reason, or would you rather hear you can drive right through there whenever you want, bring dump trucks in there, get to phases 6 and 7, and build whatever you want and have at it? So this is where we get to control the terms, because these are our roads. So the rights that we would not get in the entry road, I have drafted into our license agreement that we're giving them. So if they want to use the entry road to bring in dump trucks for whatever purpose, they're not going to get through on our license. The license is limited. It's limited to someone coming in, and they can only use our roads to finish what ORA was meant to complete back in 2005. In other words, sure, you can use our roads in the resort and only a specific route, and you can only use them if you plan on developing phases 6 and 7 to be a resort of the same type, nature, standard of quality as originally, as originally contemplated by ORA when they had the grand plan of 7 phases.
We made them all drive past Mom's house.
And
Jerry's too.
so the only way under our version of the agreement that they are coming through your resort is in the capacity of completing the property, completing it like it was supposed to be done. Now that too is a problem for the trustee, because now he has to tell the developer, yeah, you can use the entry road, but you're not getting in through their resort unless you're there to finish the resort as phases 6 and 7. Which sounds a lot worse than, yeah, you get to use the roads all you want and go build something out there and you get to drive right through the resort. So
Anywhere you want to go, anytime you want to do it, middle of the night.
yeah. So we've severely limited the trustees' rights, but at the same time kept the rights that you guys have had the whole time. So those are the 2 roadway related agreements, if you hit it again. The next question for you is, one more. These are landscape license and easement agreements. There are portions of this property that are, they have green belt, what we've been calling green belts. It's nice grassy area that we do not own. And if we don't maintain, it will all just grow out and become an eyesore. So we said to the trustee, can you please just convey those? There are already patches of grass for us. We already maintain them. And we find out that Outdoor Resorts did a lot line adjustment before they went bankrupt.
You might want to explain. A lot line adjustment is...
Okay, so there was a portion of the property that was encroaching onto another person's land. So Outdoor Resorts had to fix the lot line so that it would no longer encroach onto your the neighboring properties. In doing that, they did it wrong. What they did when they filed, it's called a lot line adjustment. They recorded it, but they didn't perfect it with title, and they also didn't change the Phase 6 condo map plan for development. So the very document that creates that parcel is now changed by one document, but the very document that created it isn't changed. So they don't match up. So the county doesn't know what to do with it. They don't know what to do with this land. What it's basically amounted to is potentially an illegal subdivision of land. And the trustee, as an officer of the court, cannot convey land that may have been illegally subdivided. So they can't give us the sliver of grass because they don't know what the nature of the property is. They don't know how to look at it. Is it that component that originally drafted? Is it the component with the lot line adjustment area? Are these 2 separate components? Nobody knows.
And what rights they own and don't own and everything else that goes with it.
So
That's one. There's 2.
So you get an idea what he's talking about. We've mentioned this before. There's a sliver of land that goes out to the pool out here on the last phase. It literally runs from there to the corner, and when they surveyed it, they kind of encroached on the neighbor's property, saying that, well, this is where the line is, when actually the neighbor who owned that land was his property. So now when we go to get it corrected, none of that works because the way they did it, neither the old way or the new way is legal. So that's what we're trying to get corrected here. Because we don't want to take it on after we've got this all resolved and have to go back to court and beat this thing to death and spend more money to get this thing corrected. It's better to do it now in this document than it is to come back 6 months later and go, oh, wait a minute, you do own half our pool.
So that patch of grass was months of researching, negotiations, speaking to surveyors, looking into the county rules, looking into the Subdivision Map Act, and trying to figure out what that land really is. And between our office, a land use attorney, the trustee's attorney, the trustee's real estate attorney, and their land use people, nobody knows. Nobody can figure out what ORA did and what it means legally in terms of what this parcel is. It would literally take the county coming in and just saying, you know what, screw it, here's what we think it is, and it's done, stamped, county. That would be the only way to resolve that. So these agreements are drafted to allow us access to those properties, to keep maintaining them, keep them looking nice, and offers a way for those issues to be corrected, and once corrected by whoever would be the person that purchases that property, immediately conveyed to us. So next slides, John.
Do you guys want to take about a 5 or 6 minute break, or you want to keep going?
We're almost done explaining the conveyance agreement, and we can take a break and then...
Let's get through what he's got right here, and then we'll take a break because there's more to launch into. A couple more minutes. Okay.
Okay, the second to two last agreements are with regards to your water well, your water wells around the property, and one's for the water tank and the water well on the hill. The agreements drafted by the trustee would allow any developer to come in here and use as much water as he wanted out of that tank, and for whatever properties that he wanted to develop, whether it be 6 and 7 for his own purposes, or some of the lots that he has outside of the resort. What we did is bring the power back to Rancho and make sure that the rights that Rancho has in the water are, one, exclusive, meaning you're the only ones that can use your water, and two, if you run out of water, you have the right to find more water in those same areas. These are rights the trustee does not want. He does not want you guys to be the sole exclusive users of the water. He wants to be able to tell another developer, hey, you got all the water you need right here, look at this tank. And he also wants to say, this land will be undisturbed. They're not allowed to look for more water. If they run out of water, they got to go find it somewhere on their own property, which is never even the real intention. As bad as ORA wasn't even their intentions. So those two are very important and really, really the focal point of our arguments with the trustee. It's our rights to water, because without water, we're doomed out here. Next slide, please. And the final agreement is the building and outdoor space easement and license agreement. This is for that small clubhouse office that trustee now owns the airspace of. It's a right for Rancho to use that office exclusively and only have to hand it over back to a developer who, if they ultimately purchase the land, only hand it back to them if they are going to develop phases 6 and 7 like the resort was originally supposed to be developed. You can see why the trustee would want that provision out of there, because he wants to tell a developer, hey, you get the small clubhouse office, you can use it as a sales office, you can use it as your offices for whatever you want to do, for whatever purpose, whatever you want to do, because that will look appealing to a developer. Hey, I don't even need a trailer, I got an office. So we have limited it to, okay, fine, we can use it, and we'll be the only ones using it unless that developer comes in and develops 6 and 7 like ORA was supposed to. Which would be no different than when ORA was selling lots. Which again is what ORA even anticipated and contemplated at the start. And that's an example of an issue that the trustee, how they're trying to erode the owner's rights so as to make the property more marketable. So that, I believe that's the final slide in terms of, yeah. So what you've just learned about is the history of the bankruptcy, how we got where we are today, the things that hung up this deal in between the negotiations for the purchase agreement. You've learned about what the purchase agreement is, how it works, its components, the bidding process. What if we're outbid? You've also learned about what your rights are if you are outbid, and what properties you will own, and your water rights, your access rights, your rights to the roads, and everything that goes with that.
So just jumping in one quick thing. So we have actually got these documents drafted. We have received board approval for the way in which they would do it, and they are now sitting in the offices of the trustee. So that's where we are. We anticipate some changes. In fact, we've already started to receive some pushback from them on a few things. This is, like John had mentioned, probably like the 10th time we've gone around with these guys on it. And each time we go around, you know, it's like a funnel, right? It gets filtered down until we get closer and closer to having something that will work for all parties involved. So with that, why don't we take a 5-minute break, and then Mark and I can field any questions that you all, as the actual owners, the people we're doing this for, have.
Come back to order, please. Around with microphones, so please, if you would, wait to get a microphone, because as we've been trying to do with all the meetings is to put this on the web, and there's a lot of people who have a ton of questions, and we've gotten a lot of really positive feedback about being able to put this out there for those that are traveling or whatever they couldn't attend today. So with that, we'll give it back to Will. There's a couple of points to talk about on things that are coming up yet.
Thanks, John, and thank you, Mark. I know everybody's got questions, so I want to get the questions started right away. I've received a couple of really good questions here on the sidebar, so I wanted to address some of those. One is, what we can buy, and the answer to that is no, and here's what I mean by that. We, as the ownership group, have the unfettered right to use the roadways and everything else, and you as homeowners can address that with the board, and they can make those decisions. For someone to come in and use the roads, they have to have an agreement with you, an easement, a license, and everything else. So you see there's a difference in terms of what we can ultimately purchase and use and buy and what an outside person can do. You have the wells in place, you're taking the water, we've been using it for years. Somebody who comes in and buys the property that's in that wash must do so subject to those wells and the rights that come with that. If we buy the property, it's already our stuff, we already own that stuff, we've already used it, so it's a lot more of a transaction of simplicity for us to take it than somebody else. So that's why you see the pushing and the pulling, because in these agreements, if they're agreed to the way we believe that they shouldn't be, our rights get diminished, and then an outside purchaser does have an increased ability to come into the resort and take over things that we don't feel anyone has a right to take over. So that was one question I had that I thought was good and I wanted to address. In terms of the timing was another question that I had I wanted to address. Assuming that the trustee signs off on the documents the way we've given it to him, the next thing we do is we file a motion with the bankruptcy court, and we ask them to review this. Excuse me.
Approximately 5-week process.
5-week process, exactly. You file the documents with the judge. She will then approve it. We got a really good bankruptcy judge too, by the way. She's excellent. They approve the procedure. The property goes up for a public auction. We have built into our internal discussions some processes and procedures to ensure that we are at the auction, that we protect the interests of the land in terms of us getting it and all of that. So that's the rough outline of the timing. 2 additional items that you all as an ownership group will ultimately have to decide as to what you want the board to do that I wanted to talk about today, which will be subject of a future vote, are the following. One, assuming we know we're going to get some land no matter what happens. For example, the clubhouse and some other items. Even if some Donald Trump comes in and bids millions of dollars out from under us to try to buy the property, we will still take property. So you as an ownership group will have to vote on whether you want to have that property annexed in as common area, which makes no sense not to. If we get all of the property, you will then be asked to make a vote on annexing all of the property that you want as common area, i.e. phases 6 and 7 and so on. And the board will decide how the wording of that is, and you'll get the ballot and be able to vote on that. The second component would be to give the board the authority, that's your group that functions on your behalf, give the board the authority to sell the portions of the outlying resort areas that it doesn't really have a need for. For example, that property up in San Diego County is outside of Riverside. There's problems with annexing that into a common area of land in Riverside County. There's some issues there. I'll be happy to address that in a further meeting if necessary, but the board will be asking for those votes probably in the next couple of weeks. I imagine there'll be more discussion, but they need the authority to obviously sell property that you will ultimately own, right? So those are the two things that, anything else, John, in terms of administrative?
No.
Okay, those are the two items that I wanted to make mention of, that we will have that future vote, both with the annexing of the property in terms of it being common area, and then the transfer or sale of certain property that will really not serve any function or purpose for the HOA other than giving us, more land to maintain and pay property taxes on.
That's one of the reasons we want to annex it, because common area property for an HOA, you don't pay property taxes. And the ORA has not paid the property taxes on all that, which is part of what they're going to have to catch up with when this thing gets settled. Either we win it or somebody else gets it. The estimated on that is about 150 grand. Well, they got to pay for it, but if we don't annex it, we may end up at some point when we own it, let's say we don't sell it for 5 years, we could end up paying the property taxes if it doesn't become part of the common area of the whole resort. And what he was talking about is because part of it extends into San Diego County, we're not clear at this point yet if we can annex, because this is a Riverside HOA, if we can annex property in San Diego County. So there's maybe some legal going back and forth how to make that work, but it's not impossible. It's just that it makes sense to do this as a common area and get us out of it probably 20 grand a year, we're thinking, in property tax, okay? That's what's behind that one. And the other one on disposal of property is we'd like to be able to say this is what we do and don't want, and get the authority from you guys to say you get a great offer on it. Let's just hypothetically saying, let's say someone offers, and I don't have anything going, they offer us $500,000 to buy the property. Is that a good price? I don't want to have to come back and spend 30 days getting a vote and lose the deal to dump the property, to sell off the asset and then get what we want out of it to pay back someone with the amount of money that we're actually going to have to fork out to buy all this. So I hope that makes sense. And that's what we're trying to get, okay? It's an important thing because what we've learned is timing on this is of the essence. And when you get a deal, you're going to have, we want to be able to make this move faster because there's still going to be an escrow and a closing like every other legal transaction on property in California, but we don't want to have to wait 30 days before they can get rolling on the escrow and get the process going on a ballot. So we will at some point discuss what we do and don't want. I mean, we don't like to keep the dog park. I'm thinking maybe the 2 lots up on the hill. But beyond that, for those who've had the pleasure of going up there, you're pretty much going to be a mountain goat on a lot of it. And it doesn't make sense to hang on to property that we're not going to do anything with. I mean, if someone wants to build a ranch, build a ranch. Have a nice day. The only other thing I can think of is that the acreage is up in San Diego County. They may find somebody who wants to put a winery. So go for it. We're not in the winery business. And take a free wine from the deal. Yeah. I mean, look, we may say, look, we have someone who's interested, then don't sell it, but lease it. I don't know. Yeah, but the idea is to get the property out there, get it moving once we obtain it, and then turn it away so we're not paying the tax on it. That's why we're talking about that, okay? So if you would, if you have questions, and I know you do, because if you don't, you probably slept through a good portion of this. Normally that would cost you a couple $100 for that education on bankruptcy and the complexity of this. So you understand who you're dealing with. The trustees, these guys are estimating that they have probably 200 bankruptcies going at the same time. When you go buy a car and you get $8,000 off and you think, boy, I got them good. They didn't sell it at a loss. So these guys are good at it. The car salesmen are good at it on an everyday basis. These guys are good at it, and they're not real thrilled with these two characters because they're pushing back hard on it. We actually got to the point that we would not let them write the documents anymore. They've been writing them because what we would get back was so bad that it was ridiculous. And we started reading through it, and we just threw it. Don't waste our time. So Mark and Will have been writing all the documents and going to the trustees with it. That's why we've gotten where we are. Okay. So questions? Where did you get a mic? We've got a couple of them out there.
Point them out.
Okay, right here. Go ahead, you've got it already?
Is it on? Yes. Good. I'm Barbara Waddell, Lot 493. Even though my document, my deed shows that I have a fractional shares of the golf course and the commons, where are the deeds to these? And if the sale falls apart, how do we get the overriding deed?
So if I understand the question is, do you own the golf course is essentially the question. Yes, the golf course, all of the golf course holes that are currently operational and built are within the ownership of the HOA as a common area component. They have all of the grant deeds that demonstrate that.
Barbara, I've compiled over the course of the years all of the documents creating the individual parcels and common areas, which are under condo plan maps, and the documents recorded by the developer, which not only annexed those parcels to the governance of the CC&Rs, but also grant deeded over to Rancho those components. So while your title will say like you own 1/32 of a common area, we have the documents showing what that common area is and the title to it and the grant deeds, so that you know that what that 1/32 means.
There was some confusion in the documentation as to whether or not all of the golf course holes currently built and operational were within the possession and ownership of the HOA. And we can tell you that they are.
Over here.
It's been requested that you give your name and your lot number.
Hi, Ted Arnold, 503. I just have a question.
Yes.
You know, if you listen to these conveyances, why in the world would the trustees ever sign them?
Well, the reason that they would sign it is because they ultimately have to disperse and liquidate the assets within the estate of the bankrupt entity. They cannot continue to just not do that. And they know that they have to do that, and they're duty bound to do that. And so what they're doing is they're using, you're in that gray area. Well, how many rights do we have as an estate that's bankrupt to the property? And when you have, it's like, I guess the best way to do it is this. If ORA was clean and Outdoor Resorts Rancho California was clean in terms of the documentation that was existing before the bankruptcy was filed, there wouldn't be any kind of question. But when you have a situation like this, where you have lot line issues, you have ownership interests in terms of who owns what property where, use permits, you've got two people who have the right to use land on top of each other, it becomes amazingly complicated to take that ownership interest and separate it out like that. Because you got somebody who wants to gobble up all of the interests so that they can ultimately make the most attractive offer to a third party for sale. And the thing about it is we've done a fair amount of beating up on the trustee and the trustee's lawyers today. And Mark and I have spent countless hours calling them names behind closed doors. But the reality of it is that these guys are doing a job, right? Their job as the trustee and the lawyers for the trustees are to take these agreements and write them in the way that makes the deal the most attractive to an outside purchaser. Because, and this is not a knock on them, but they do not care about your rights. They do not care about what you own. If you will let them, they will just take it all and sell it to a third party because they have an obligation to the court to get as much money into the bankrupt entity as possible. So it's not that they're bad guys, although, but I have a bias towards the ownership interest, which is all of you, that I want all of it to go here because at one point in time you sat in a sales office or in a sales meeting and you were told that you would get 18 holes of golf, that you would get these things. And so it has been sort of a personal fight, if you will, for Mark and I to see this thing through to the end to make sure that that happens because we've been so involved with this place, both when ORA sold it and sold it by doing all kinds of things. This property that you're sitting in right now, as you all know, has adjacent to it tennis courts. Okay? When Mark and I did the lawsuit, we found out that Outdoor Resorts Rancho California built those tennis courts right on top of a leach field. Yeah. So that was the first thing we did. Get that all sorted out. Right? Once that was all done, then we go back and say, okay, well, now we've got this bankruptcy component to this case. We need to get this property so that, people like Don, who, just to pick on him again, where his property is, doesn't have to look out at, a pig farm or something, as we've used as examples. He has a right to get those golf course holes built, as was represented to him when he purchased the property. So that is a long answer, but that's why ultimately we believe that some deal will be struck with the trustee.
And real quick, the other thing you also want to consider as a question is, why hasn't anybody else bought it from the trustee? And on that same token, it's because of these rights that are inherent in this property that we are now trying to memorialize in agreements with the trustee that makes other people shy away from it. So just to give you an idea of the complexity and why would the trustee sign this? Well, they don't have to sign this, but nobody else is.
Right. If they don't let us have an agreement with them that works for you all to preserve your rights, then we will not enter into an agreement with them. If somebody comes in and buys the property out from under us or tries to, they have to go through an approval process with the court. Then we will show up, Mark and I, and all of you will stand behind us. And the judge will say, oh my God. And we will make sure that our voices are heard.
So you understand how that part works. We literally do go, and then it goes, and someone could buy it. On the other side, they have to qualify before they can go and bid against what we put in. They can't just walk up off the street, chewing on a McDonald's burger and say, I'll give you $2 million. They have to come in, and there's specific things they have to qualify with. You got to have the money to pay for it. You got to have the ability to develop it. There's a list of stuff. So you just can't walk off the street and say, yeah, I'll give you $1.6 million, and then get it and then not have the money, because it doesn't work that way. It's not an open thing like you see on TV. Okay? Who's got the mic next?
Kathy Dickinson, Lot 87. I've owned since '99, so I have a lot of history here. 2 questions. One, and they're not related. One, I didn't hear one word about the easement for High Point. Has that been addressed in any of the paperwork?
No, that's actually one of the, are you talking about the New Sea easement agreement where they're allowed to travel? That would just be something that we would inherit as a purchase of the property as an encumbrance against it, that they're allowed to use. The easement would just continue as is, yeah.
They continue the same rights they've always had.
Okay.
But the trustee technically owns that easement, right?
That's been a sore note for many years with us. Okay, question number 2. I think it was the year 2000, ORA purchased 10, because we were having so much problems with the High Point stuff, 10 acres past the 6 and 7 out to Orpeza.
That's that red area. Yeah.
I couldn't quite see it on the map, but is that 10 acres included? And at that time, Orpeza was going to be the entrance.
Let's assume you get the property through the purchase one way or the other. I think that you all, ladies and gentlemen here, will get all of the property, is my opinion, through all of this. Then you would be able to approach your board about developing that for an entryway or an exit. But that property is included within the purchase that we have contemplated. In fact, and let me just make sure I don't, because there's been a lot of back and forth and everything. Just so you guys know, we do in fact have a deal with the trustee. That's done. We've offered to buy all of the property for $750, which was rounds and rounds and rounds of negotiation on the price point. We inched up, and they inched down until we got to a meeting of the minds. So the property, for all intents and purposes, has been purchased by us, right? It's just now, because of the bankruptcy components to it, and the bidding that is required under the U.S. federal bankruptcy codes, we have this process that we've got to massage through. So we do technically own all of those items that you saw on the map. We just have to close the deal. And if anybody's ever been through a real estate transaction where you did an escrow and then the thing fell apart, you know that sometimes there can be a complication that ultimately does away with the deal that you had. But the hands have been shaken, the deal is done, price is selected, and we're trying to bring it across the finish line. Next. He's fast with that mic.
Jody Thomas, site 231. So if I understand what you just said, and then I have a question. A deal has been reached. It's the subject tos.
Correct.
Okay. The second thing that I wanted to actually ask is, you talked about process timing, and you mentioned a 5-week period.
Right.
But I assume that 5-week period ends when the trustee agrees to sign the documents. Then you go to court and there's 5 weeks. When does the 5 weeks?
The 5-week period is technically underway now, assuming we get an agreement from the trustee that he'll sign off on the documents as worded. What's from the time that they sign these documents, you have about a 5-week process to where it's all just done.
It's federal bankruptcy rules,
right?
Procedure.
But there's no requirement. I mean, the negotiations regarding the conveyance and subject thereto could go on for a period of time before the 5 weeks actually either begins or ends. Is that right?
5 weeks does not start until the agreement's done.
Right. And so since there is no agreement, the continued negotiations could take weeks or months or days.
Well, I'll put it to you this way. Over my dead body, will I let someone sign this and take away your rights? So if that takes 2 months or 3 months or 6 months or whatever it takes, it is, I'm not going to... Right? It's kind of like this, right? We've all agreed to go to the prom. It's just my date doesn't like what I'm wearing.
So you understand, with the recommendation from Will and Mark and the board's agreement, we've signed the document that we sent to them. Okay? Their job now is to come back and say, we don't like this and we don't like that. So we've done what we need to do. The ball is now in their court. And if eventually they don't move forward with this and they don't come back with an agreement, we've discussed the fact we're going to go to court. Right. We're going to take them. Because we're not going to keep doing this year after year after year. Because it's, you guys are getting tired of it. I know we're really getting impatient to get this done because it's been dragging on. And we need to get what we need. At the same time, if they start changing these things to their point, we're not going to like how this turns out. So we need to make sure that it's the agreement that we all want, and that's what we're trying to get accomplished. And you're right, it could drag on, but there are ways to make it.
If we rush through this, it means we'll have given something up.
If all of a sudden they like the agreement too much, there's something in there that we haven't caught.
Right, and as to John's point, again, the trustee and their attorneys and those guys, their job is to maximize the return to the bankruptcy estate so that they can do what they need to do. So they don't have the same type of, I guess, sort of complications there. Well, who cares if it takes 6 months or 2 years or 5 years? If we can get 10 times the money, we'll sit here and just wait and wait and wait. So for us, it's a little bit of a different situation because we would like to get the resort developed and we would like to get the grocery store open and we want to get the restaurant going. And so back to Mark's point, if you have that as a leverage point over us, you just sit there and go, hey. So we need to make sure that the trustee understands that although we are anxious to get the process started and we would like to get our grocery store and our restaurant open, it is not something that we are unwilling to do to fight this out and wait if we have to make sure that the deal ultimately protects the interests of your property.
Okay, who's got the mic and where are we going? Okay, Joe.
It's Joe Crispino, lot 261. The question, what you're really arguing about, let's say, with the trustees right now, is that we have a deal to buy the property.
Right.
And that is set in stone, correct?
Yes.
What you're really arguing about is if someone else
correct
bids on the property, what rights do we have if someone else buys the property?
That's correct.
Now, if the trustees feel that this is the best deal we can get, the deal that we are giving them or something, they won't argue too much about someone else. Is that correct?
Well, the thing about it is that they have to make sure that the judge will sign off on this and that they have created a mechanism for the potential of a third-party purchaser to come in and actually complete and consummate a sale. In other words, it's the same thing for a third party. Let's say somebody else came in and bid $2 million and we went, wow, I mean, they just almost doubled our deal. And they started looking at the deal, and they got to the details of it and said, okay, there's a conditional use permit, I can't go over the property, they're going to back out. And that is what the trustee is trying to make sure that they don't have that. That he's got the best clean process so that he can transfer that property like that and eliminate any ability for us to go into the court and object.
But a lot of that is conditioned upon the trustees' thoughts about whether or not they could really sell this property at some other price,
correct,
some larger price than what you're offering.
It's more of the bankruptcy court judge being confident that the trustee has done that.
Right.
Right, okay.
They have a dual obligation to ensure that they can demonstrate to the judge that they've done everything in their power to liquidate the assets of the estate for the maximum amount possible and create a mechanism so that that reality can occur.
Yeah, they could want to sell to us for $1 and go to the court, and the judge would say, no way.
But we've already offered them the dollar, the price that we're doing. So that, the dollar, right, the dollar.
That's where we started.
So what we're saying is that we do have a deal with the trustees, correct? Okay, the other question I have regarding to the common area, I've heard two things about common area here, and I'd like to get them settled as to which is correct. One thing is that every person in here owns 1/592nd of all the common area. The other deal is that we own portions of the common area. Each area may own a portion of the common area. Which is correct?
land use attorney.
Yeah. That is a very complicated question. And essentially how it works is this, Joe. When you buy into the resort, you own a portion of the common area. And the answer to that question is however outdoor resorts drafted up the documents when they did the transfer and all that. But the easy answer to that is that each and every one of you is a part owner in the whole of the common area property. So in other words, you can't, by virtue of your purchase, you can't say, well, Joe, you can only use holes 1 and 3 because that on your material, and you can't go on 14. That can't happen. You have just as much right to go in any part of the common area as everybody else does. You all together own this place.
So Joe, you got to fix your divots on all the holes.
You're the guy.
Lucky Lot 209. I'm still a little confused here. You say we have a deal. Does that mean the trustee has signed the agreement as well? Or we've signed the agreement and we think we have a deal?
We've signed the deal. Well, so what the first step is this. The trustee has to accept the monetary amount offered for the transaction to begin with, which they will give us the property, we will give them the money. That's done. Now, what is it about the property, or what is it about the process that's held up? Well, because the bankruptcy procedure overlines this, right? It's not a normal transaction. If I own the property, there's no bankruptcy, and you have it for sale, you and I as two private entities, we could easily just transfer that property, we'd be done like that. The problem here is you have third-party people that sit out there. Outdoor Resorts Rancho California, ORRC, didn't pay the property taxes on this place for a long time. They incurred legal charges from various attorneys out in Riverside County, never paid them. On and on and on and on and on and on. So these people have a legal right to get their money because they did a work, they increased the value of this place, and they have a legal right under the U.S. Federal Bankruptcy Code to be paid. So when we have this land sale transaction where we've agreed for $750, then we've got to turn to another whole set of people who have filed claims to the money. And then the trustee has to say, pay them $1, give them nothing, pay them $1, pay me 500 grand. And judge, this is what you ought to sign off on. And so they have to, they being the trustee and his lawyers, they have to sort all of that out on their end. So it's that part of the deal that we're in the process of.
So that to me sounds like it's not a deal.
Well, no. Once I file a grant deed, you don't have the property.
See, I was of the impression that a few months ago that we were going to place a 10% escrow down payment on the property. Has that happened?
No, because once we sign off on the purchase agreement, we are triggered for that obligation.
So the escrow has not been opened yet?
No, we have an escrow officer, we have the place where we're going to go, we've got a title company, everything's in the works. Like I said, we're all going to prom, it's just whether I'm changing the suit or not, you know.
Okay.
David Lumsden, Lot 41. I think I got the conveyance agreement is our leverage in a way for this upcoming auction because it makes the property less desirable. And what we want to do is knock down the price for any potential bidder other than ourselves. So I got two questions, if that assumption is correct. Number one, is there anything that we can do beyond due diligence to make it abundantly, dramatically clear to any potential developer bidder that he's got a big problem if he comes in here because of the conveyance agreement, as you guys have managed to get it through? And secondly, is there anything else that we can do to make their potential purchase of this property unattractive to them. To use your own example, can we decide to build a pig farm right next to the old property?
Well, so
this is all extra legal. I'm really talking about PR,
right?
And
so I know where you're going. So if we were to do something that was intended to frustrate the trustee's ability to sell the property to somebody else, they would be able to go to court and stop that. We can't do anything like that. We've got to be above board, and that's what we're going to do. We have a good faith offer, we have a good process in place, and that's what we're going to do. And I feel that we'll be successful in that regard. The point being, though, is that the flip side of that coin is we're not going to give up rights that we have so that the property looks more attractive to somebody else.
Yeah.
You know, that's the point of it.
I'm only saying, can we go further in that direction and make it even less?
I wouldn't. That would never be a recommendation that I would deliver to the homeowners because, number one, first of all, I would never want them to do that to you, which is what they're doing, in my opinion, by the way they're drafting these up. The court ultimately, in its power to bring equity to the sides, is not going to look at us with any type of favor if we were to exercise our activities in that way. What we need to do is we need to give a good faith offer, make sure people know what we own, we're not going to give it up, and we are willing to do what we need to do to secure the sort of the retention, if you will, of our rights.
One thing I failed to mention, which I've discussed at previous meetings, is without even lifting a finger, we have one thing that makes this entire property undesirable to somebody else, and that's a conditional use permit, because that is a county planning department approved permit to use this property, including phases 6 and 7, in a certain manner, and that manner is as an RV resort. So any developer that would want to come in, let's say we just rolled over and didn't lift a finger and didn't object or anything, that developer would still be subject to the conditional use permit. It would have to go down to the county and petition for either getting that land out of the conditional use permit or getting a variance or a change in the conditional use permit, which requires all of the county departments, building, safety, environmental, and public hearings, Caltrans, public hearings, where all of you would go and you know, go nuts. Make the it would all come out. There's no like fly-by-night operation that could come in and change the surrounding area.
And all of these potential drawbacks will be fully apparent to any other bidder.
Correct.
At some point, one way or another, it'll be fully apparent.
I'm sorry.
This might answer a lot of questions. Let's assume that Donald Trump came in here and said, I want to buy this property and I'm going to develop it, okay? As long as he does it the way we've said, we are not necessarily opposed to that. Build us a really nice couple of golf holes. They're going to be ours anyway because under the permit, you have to give them to us. So as long as you're okay with that, go crazy. Build the most wonderful extension to the resort, then comes with it all the obligations to maintain the property and do everything else. If that were to happen, great. That's what we all bought into initially. What we won't do is we will not erode those rights so that some other purchaser can come in and take the property out from under us at a level that we were never anticipating when you all purchased your property in here. So that's kind of, I guess, what we're trying to do. We'll buy the property and we'll do it. Or if you sell it to a third party, they got to do what we would do, or what an outdoor resorts rancho California would have done, which is to complete this thing the way it was supposed to be completed right.
So we've had a couple people come in here to try and buy the place. And one of them came in and our only comment to him was, you got to read the governing documents. And the trustees were mad and threatened all kinds of legal action. But when they figured out, when we told them again and again, you have to read the governing documents. Once they read those, suddenly it was really unattractive. Now, I don't know if you're aware, but if somebody comes in and develops phase 6 and 7, and let's say they turn them loose in 2 phases of 100 each. As soon as they turn those loose for sale, they owe the HOA dues every month for every unsold lot. So I got 100 lots times 410 every month. Don't care if you sold it or not, you need to pay it.
That's California law.
And that's a huge drawback. Think of this market. Who's got the money and who's going to want to come out here and buy a lot right now? It's tough to sell what we have up for sale, let alone you're going to dump another 200 lots into the system and say, I got to front the money for this thing for X number of months or a year or more to satisfy the HOA because I got to pay the fees even though I haven't got a buyer for them. That's a huge drawback. And that's one of the things that we're talking about. Let's not make it attractive. Let's not make it really ugly, but let's not make it attractive. Let's not make it to the point we're doing something with the pig farm either, because the pig farm in our case is our CC&Rs, which says you've got to pay. That's a huge thing. Okay. Next, who's got the mic? Go ahead.
I'm Kathy and Ron Silva. We just bought in 529, so I did get those CC&Rs. And I wish I'd have got them before. No, I'm kidding. But what I do want to say, and what my question is to you, and I know we're kind of almost to the final here, but don't mess with senior citizens is my #1 comment. And have you asked for letters, or is there any kind of support that these people can give? I mean, I've got nothing but time, and I'm really good at letter writing, as I'm sure a lot of other people. Is there anything that can be submitted in addition to support from the people that own in here?
Great offer, and there may come a time when, if these things aren't accepted as we've proposed, that we will be in front of a judge. And if that day comes, we will need your support.
We all get buses, and
I want your voice to be. I want your voices to be absolutely. We would want your voice to be heard. And to the extent that we have issues with the county, if we do get the property and things we have to do there, absolutely, I would want your support there. I know that if you're new, you weren't there for the trial that Mark and I did, but we were very fortunate that we had the support of the members, and I see faces of a lot of people that came to the trial who sat back there, and listened to that stuff. And the jurors saw that, the judge saw that, and it was very, very, very important for people to know that there was individuals behind what we were asking for. This wasn't like a couple lawyers arguing. It was, I'm fighting for the rights of the people behind me.
Yeah, we can be really annoying.
Your
But
#1 asset is in your guys' patience.
Yes, that's a great point.
and they have. I've talked to a lot of neighbors.
Mark's comment, so that everybody here is the biggest asset that you've provided is your patience, and that is absolutely accurate. The other thing I'll say is that Mark and I do a lot of work with a lot of different homeowners association boards, and the majority of the time they don't want to be bothered, they don't read stuff, they don't look at it. It's a mess. It's tough to work with them. You're educating them, then they forget, and then you got to do it again and back and back. They don't participate. Your board, and this is the iteration of, I think, the third different version of this, because I've had 3 different boards to go through essentially. Your board is unbelievable. I mean, they're responsive. They drive down to San Diego to our office to meet with us. They're constantly calling us back. They're constantly putting us in headlocks when we do things that they don't like. So the point being, to kind of buttress your comment there and follow it up, is that you guys really do, as an HOA, have a very good group here, and it's reflected in your board.
And are willing to do more. Just a comment on the air in that office. My suggestion is you get a 55-gallon drum, suck the air out of it, label it, and take it to court.
I like that idea.
Sue Van Hoosen, I can't, it's hard for me
So
to get up.
Who's up?
I got to go to my default. Ladies first.
Sue Van Hoosen, lot 412. 2 questions. First of all, do either of you guys own property in here?
We would, if I owned a property in here, then I would have a conflict of interest.
I thought.
So,
probably. Okay.
Would like to, but
you keep saying we, and I feel like you're one of my neighbors. The second question, and this may be beside the point, but is there access to the lot that's in San Diego, or what kind of?
That's a good question. On the lot in San Diego, there's been a bunch of questions about, oh, that guy's, he's locking that, and there's no way. Under the law, it is illegal for someone to landlock you. In other words, if you, let's say you own a piece of property, and all around you, the property is owned by somebody who's a real cantankerous individual, and they say, no, you're not crossing my land. That's 30 seconds. I go into court, I tell the judge, I get a guy out there, we'll bolt cut that thing off, and he's done. So don't worry about that. It is illegal to landlock anybody. We have an absolute right to have ingress and egress to our property.
Is it contiguous to the rest of your properties?
It is connected, yes.
Through other properties that we would purchase.
Through other properties that we would purchase over some very...
It does go all the way through.
Yeah.
And we'll get that map scanned in and then email it to everybody, because it's kind of an interesting layout. We'll put the bigger one up on the office in there.
That's where I would go back and get the help, and we'd take all of us and we'd get some lunches and we'd go up there and say, hi. We're going to...
Got a question over here on the right.
Yes.
I have Wilfred Kohler, lot 139. I have two questions. Is there ever a time limit for the trustee to eventually come up with a decision? And my number two question is, part of the conveyance are the tennis courts. Could we now actually go ahead and improve those tennis courts, or do we have to wait for something else?
One of the things that we've talked about, and I think we talked about it this morning, is Will said, why would you improve an asset that you don't own and make it beneficial to the trustees? And it's kind of the restaurant and the store. I would love to get a group of volunteers to go in there and strip that place out, clean it up, get an operator and turn it loose. The problem is you've done the same thing. You've improved their asset.
So we really don't own those yet?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. Listen, I'm wanting it as much as anybody else.
And to your first question, yes, there is a timing component. The trustees have to appear before the bankruptcy judge regularly for status checks, and she's constantly like, what is going on? So this thing is coming to a head.
And roaming around, we got one up here, one over there, and one on this side. Stand up.
I'd like to ask the obvious question. I've heard everything you said.
Name and lot?
Oh, Richard Heidi, 353.
Okay.
I've heard everything you said, makes sense to me, but I'm not an attorney. But if I was on an ocean liner that was sinking and the captain came with a great plan, when he got all done, I'd ask him the obvious question. Think it's going to work? What's your opinion based on how much you know about the case and your time in the legal profession? This whole thing going to fly and we're going to be smiling?
Great question. Let me answer it this way. I have a lot of clients that ask me, what do you think we're going to do with the deal, and we're negotiating and everything else, and I always tell them, never listen to what anybody says, because people talk with their feet. If he's still in the other room negotiating with me, that means he wants to do the deal. If he walks away and he leaves, then we have a problem. Because people talk with their feet. And so I don't listen to what they say. I don't do any of that. I just look at the activity. They've accepted our deal. They've edited our agreements. They're expending the sums. They want to do the deal too. So do I think it'll work? Yes, because of the activity level that I see from the trustee. The only thing that I can't answer definitively for you folks or the board is this. Will someone come and outbid us and offer $2-3 million? I don't know. I can tell you that I personally believe that is not going to happen. And why? Again, I look at what people do with their feet. This place had been actively marketed for sale by Ron Petty and Shellhorn and ORA for 2.5 to 3 years before they dumped it into the bankruptcy. Why did they put it into a bankruptcy proceeding? Because it was more beneficial to them personally and their corporation to just get rid of it and take the loss and write down their outline obligations financially than it was for them to continue to try to sell the property. Why is the property something that nobody wants to buy? Who is going to come in here and take you all on as a partnership when they don't know you? They have the conditional use permit sitting there. You have CC&Rs. There's an automatic obligation to transfer back to you a big swath of land that they would ultimately buy in 6 and 7 and they'd have to develop. Remember, the golf course stuff, if they build it, has to go back to you. So that's an answer to your question. Yes, the ship might have got hit by an iceberg, but I don't think we're on the Titanic.
Okay. Hi, I'm Pete Harris, Lot 301. Just a quick one here. You mentioned an auction earlier, and I'm a little confused. Is it something like you do at the steps of the courthouse where everybody shows up? When is that scheduled?
It's in the courtroom, and it gets scheduled by the judge once we submit the documentation and she signs off on the process and the procedure. You guys will be involved and informed about every step of this. Let's assume that tomorrow the trustee sends us back all these documents signed. You will know the minute that happens. We will file a motion to have the bankruptcy court approve the process and the procedure. You will know about the date. You will all be given an opportunity to come to the court and see the transaction for yourself. With respect to this date of the auction, you will all be invited to that. Without going into a bunch of detail, your board has already instituted contingencies to make sure that they are there for the bidding process and ensure a protective measure is put in place so that we don't get outbid.
So there's not a time frame when that's going to occur yet?
The whole process, once we get these documents signed, is about 5 weeks.
Okay, so that's the period for the auction.
You'll know if they sign it. You're going to hear, the board is going to be running around here screaming and hooting and hollering like crazy. You'll know right away, trust me. Nobody's more anxious than we are. Any other questions? Up in front? And then we'll come over in a second.
Ken Kane, lot 521. On this paperwork that you've given it to them, in your knowledge of the case and stuff, you've already gotten some feedback, so you think there's like 1, 2, 3 more revisions we have to do, or?
No, the board has pretty much signed off on this, and they're pretty committed to having this set of documents accepted or not.
So if they do not accept it, then we'd have to go to court. There's not an arbitrator to go to say, hey, we're at.
The next step would be to exercise, as you just mentioned, some type of alternative dispute resolution, and that's what I would be proposing, that the board sit down face to face and we try to hammer out where the disagreements are. If we're going to have disagreements, we know that there'll be some changes that they're going to want, and we'll have to take a look at what those are and determine whether or not they affect us in a negative way.
Thank you guys for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having us. Yes?
Just one, Jim Harper, 398. One question on a procedural thing. I presume that the judge, and you'd indicated she's quite favorable as far as you're concerned, is she privy to all of these negotiations and the agreements and non-agreements that's been made between you and...
She can get anything she wants.
So during this process, she's privy to all this information?
No, not that you don't go file in each step of the way the details. But if there was a breakdown, she'd want to see that back and forth. There's motion practice where we submit what we think's right, they submit what they think's right. The judge reads all that, and then she calls the balls and strikes the way she sees. But she's a great judge, though. We've got a good one.
So once the trustees submit this final document, if they approve it, then this will be through her quite readily then?
Yes. You've got about a 5-week total process from start to finish. The judge would then look at the agreements, ensure that they pass muster, look at the trustee, make sure that everything is okay with them in terms of the process, set a date for the auction, set a date for the close. We would then immediately deposit the escrow money, and that escrow account would be opened, and you'd see all of those dominoes fall right away.
Okay. All right. I know there's probably more questions, so we'll take like one more, and we've been sitting here quite a while, and everybody's got a lot of interest in this because it's about the future, but we'll be here for a bit. They'll be here for a bit. You can come up and ask questions to them individually.
To the extent you might have a question too, you can always submit that to the board, and then they determine that and get those questions to us, so we can do that.
If we don't know the answer, we'll tell you.
Okay, Jack Esser, 231. I'm curious about the auction, the upcoming auction that's going to happen. It's going to happen, right?
Right.
It has to happen.
Yes.
All right. So is it an open auction? In other words, if someone bids $760,000, can we then change our bid? How does this work?
In working with the board, we have developed the contingencies for the bid process. You can't just go and bid $1 over us. You have to bid within a certain amount of increment. You have to demonstrate that you have the funds and the wherewithal to develop the resort. And in addition to that, because we've maintained the property in certain circumstances for the bankrupt estate, we've built in a certain contingency where you have to even give us that back as an over component. So it's very difficult. In terms of it being open, anybody can come in and bid on the property.
Can we rebid?
Yes, we can.
Okay, that's fine.
Yes.
It's actually an auction, and is it a shouting out auction, or is it all through paperwork?
It's in the courtroom with the judge. It's a standard procedure. It's all within the documents that are going to be here for you guys to review. Yep, you got it.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.